Hello and welcome to Introduction to Cells. In this lesson are what are the two types of cells and their structures. Specifically, what we're going to learn in this lesson is how are prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells both similar and different. And what do the structures in a cell actually do? As always, let's start out with some key vocabulary. The first word is cell membrane. Now, a cell membrane is a flexible covering that protects the inside of the cell from the environment outside the cell. And both plant and animal cells have cell membranes. A cell wall is part of a plant cell, and it is a stiff structure on the outside of the membrane that protects a cell from attack by viruses and other harmful substances. You also have the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is the liquid part of a cell inside the membrane. You have the cytoskeleton, and the cytoskeleton is a network of thread-like proteins joined together that give a cell its shape, and it also helps that cell to move. Organelles are membrane-surrounded components of eukaryotic cells with a specialized purpose or function inside that cell. Now keep in mind, prokaryotic cells do not have membrane or organelles. So they are membrane surrounding components of only eukaryotic cells. Then you have chloroplasts. Chloroplast is an organelle inside a plant that uses light energy to make food. All right? It's involved in the process photosynthesis. So let's go ahead and begin our lesson. Understand that the size and the shape of a cell relates to its function. And cells are made of different structures that perform different functions that keep the cell alive. So again, the way a cell is shaped will define its job or its function. Now, the cell membrane is one of the parts of a cell, and that's flexible covering, that's keyword flexible, that protects the inside of a cell, as opposed to a cell wall, and that is a stiff, so it's not flexible. And that is outside the cell membrane, but it also protects a cell. The cytoskeleton is a network of proteins that look like threads, and they're all joined together, right? And it maintains the shape of an animal cell. So let's look at an animal cell. This is an animal cell. So you can see the various organelles, etc. So you have the mitochondria, right? There it is. This little pink thing. You have lysomes, you have ribosomes, those little itty-bitty things right there. You have the Golgi body right there, and you have this nucleus right here. And you also have, remember we talked about the cell membrane. It's all along the outside right here. And the cytoplasm is all this liquid stuff inside. Now, when you talk about prokaryotic cells have cell appendages called flagellum, and that kind of helps it move, all right? So you'll see them do this. And the flagella and cilia, which are these little things on the outside of the cell here, are all for movement. Now, let's look at a plant cell. A plant cell gets its shape from the cell wall. Remember, animal cells do not have cell walls. So that's one of the big differences, all right? It still does have a nucleus, and it still does have mitochondria, and it still has a membrane, and it still has cytoplasm and ribosomes. So there's a lot of similarities between plants and animals. So you can see what an animal cell or a plant cell looks like here. very similar. Again, you'll see a lot of the same structures. One of the things that is different is also chloroplast. Animals do not have chloroplast because we do not convert sunlight into energy. And the other big difference is the cell wall. Remember that the cytoplasm is the fluid part inside a cell. So that's the fluid inside the cell. We call it the cytoplasm. Now, with good microscopes, they were able to discover that cells were two types, and we've talked about them. They are prokaryotic and eukaryotic. So prokaryotic and eukaryotic, those are the two groups of cells. Those are the two big ones. Now, most prokaryotic cells are unicellular, and they are called prokaryotes. So they're only made of one cell, and they're called prokaryotes. So the genetic material inside a prokaryotic cell is not surrounded by a membrane. All right? So it's just kind of in there because there's no nucleus inside that cell. So everything is just kind of right here, just kind of floating around in the cell. So that's where all the DNA is kept, inside a prokaryotic cell, not inside the nucleus. Plants, animals, fungi, etc. Are all made of eukaryotic cells, which are called eukaryotes. So prokaryotic cells are prokaryotes. Eukaryotic cells are eukaryotes. And a eukaryotic cell, the genetic material is surrounded by a membrane. So we keep most of the genetic material in a specific place. And also remember, you got a lot of that inside the nucleus. So every organelle, right, has a special function. It has something very specific it does for the cell to be able to do what it's supposed to do. So how are prokaryotic and eukaryotic similar and different? Well, one, genetic material. It is not surrounded by a membrane in prokaryotic. It is. And also, prokaryotic cells are unicellular. So that's how they're different. Obviously, they are similar in that they are both cells. And they both have genetic material. So in a eukaryotic cell, the genetic material is surrounded by a membrane, and it has organelles. All right? So how are they similar? They're both cells. And how are they different? One, the prokaryotic how are they similar? They're both cells, and they both have genetic material, DNA. How are they not the same? Well, prokaryotic cells, that genetic material has no membrane. It's just kind of floating in the cell. And also, prokaryotic cells are unicellular organisms. Eukaryotic cells, the genetic material is surrounded by a membrane. And eukaryotic cells have organelles. Again, organelles enable cells to carry out different functions at the same time. Each organelle has its own job, right, that it's supposed to be doing. Now, the nucleus is part of a eukaryotic cell because prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus. And this nucleus contains the DNA. All right? It stores all the genetic information inside this nucleus for the cell. And in most cells, the nucleus is pretty much the biggest part of the cell. So DNA in a nucleus is organized into structures called chromosomes. All right? Chromosomes are the structure. You know, see that little X thing right there? So This is a chromosome. Now, the nucleus is also, nucleus is also contained in the nucleus, and it makes the ribosomes. All right? And these ribosomes actually produce protein. The nuclear envelope is a porous two-membrane structure that surrounds the nucleus. The two structures are the outer membrane and the inner membrane. And we call that the nuclear envelope that kind of surrounds the nucleus and protects it. Now, ribosomes, remember we said, are a cell's cytoplasm, and it makes the protein. We mentioned that. So, it's a rough endoplasmic reticulum, but all you need to know is the ribosomes here. And those make the proteins. And what they do is they kind of attach themselves to this rough endoplasmic reticulum here. So the endoplasmic reticulum, that's a big word, so you can just say ER. But learn how to say that, endoplasmic reticulum. And the ribosomes attach to the surface of an ER. Endoplasmic reticulum, or ER, without ribosomes, is called smooth ER. You remember when I mentioned rough ER? So, in it makes lipids like cholesterol. It also cleans out removes harmful substances. So you have the rough endoplasmic reticulum, which has ribosomes attached. So I'm going to draw this. It'll have these little dots attached to it. And then if it does not have ribosomes, then it's called smooth ER. Now, most eukaryotic cells contain mitochondria, and that's where the energy is released. All right? For plants, it's chloroplasts. And the chloroplast is what, again, uses that light energy and makes food. Now, the food for a plant is a sugar called glucose. The Golgi apparatus prepares the proteins for all their functions, because proteins are very important. And it puts these proteins into vesicles. All right? So it kind of packages the proteins to send them out to do their job. And the vesicles are these little organelles that basically transport substances like proteins from one part of the cell to another part of the cell. So maybe they're like cell taxis. And vacuoles are organelles found in some cells, and that's where they store things. Water, food, waste material. So vacuoles are kind of like storage areas or trash cans inside the cell. So, knowing that, what is the function of a Golgi apparatus? Well, a Golgi apparatus prepares proteins and packages proteins. That's what a Golgi apparatus is for. It's to prepare and package the proteins. So again, here's a nice little human or animal cell for you to look at. Very nice picture. This will be available in your materials. You also have a very nice plant cell, and this will be in your materials. So in summary, remember that a cell is protected by a flexible covering called a cell membrane. Cells are grouped into two types, prokaryotic and eukaryotic. In a chloroplast, light energy is used to make sugars called glucose, and in a process called photosynthesis. So it makes energy for the plant out of light. So that ends your lesson for what are the two types of cells and their structures. I hope you enjoyed the lesson, and we'll see you in the next one.